headlines. It's gone out of page one of the newspapers. It's gone out of most of the TV coverage is gone. Nevertheless, it grinds on day after day. And we're spending trillions of dollars. We've caused millions of Iraqis to be wounded, millions to be homeless and turned into refugees. We've had hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, many hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have died in this war. And of course, thousands, tens of thousands of U.S. citizens have been wounded and thousands have been killed in this war. And so I think we're here today to say as loudly as we know how to say it, we are not going to tolerate this. We are not going to remain silent, and we recommit ourselves to ending this war as soon as we possibly can. We know that George Bush is not listening to us, and we essentially know that right now the Congress is not going to do anything at all. This war is going to grind on until after this election, until well after this election. And so it's painful to know that our voices right now are falling on deaf ears. This war always was a war, one, about oil, and two, about sending a message to the rest of the world that the U.S. is on top and you better not mess with us. And that even if the U.S. could no longer dominate the world economically, we can't crush you economically. Bush doctrine says we'll crush you militarily. Because what we have to do is to build a movement that is bigger and bigger and bigger and unites us across national barriers, across racial barriers, across gender barriers, across all of the barriers that they put up as excuses to keep us divided against each other. The rest of us have to unite.
This demonstration is being held around the 6th anniversary of Congress giving Bush the green light for the war in Iraq. It's not enough that the war has meant almost $2 trillion of our tax money going to companies like Halliburton, to the contractors, to Lockheed Martin, to Boeing, to all the corporations who are getting rich, making armaments, making bombs, making planes. Now they're going to give another, almost $1 trillion if you count in the bailout of AIG, and the other ones that they have in mind, another $1 trillion. Where does this money come from? Where does this money come from, and what does it need?
I hope to encourage young people who are here, who maybe this might be their first protest, to see the importance of protests and what they can accomplish. I think what we're seeing from the response of people driving by, the honking, and the response of people passing by, the sentiment is with us. And it's important to be out there so that people who feel strongly about the issues see that they're not the only ones.
Yeah, that's right.
Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation. Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation. Money for jobs and education. No justice, no peace. U.S. out of the Middle East. No justice, no peace. U.S. out of the Middle East. Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation. Money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation.
I'm 50 years old, and I can tell you that every war during my lifetime was not for a cause, was not for an ideology, was not for liberation. They have all been wars of profit. It's more profound since the early 1970s because now we live in a country where the poorest people in this country in an all-volunteer army defend the rest of us. So it's our job to get off of our butts and make sure that these people are not put in harm's way for nonsense and for the profits of a few. And I want answers from the Democrats. Every even-numbered year, we hear you tell us how you were going to save us from Bush, but you gave him his war. You gave him his tax cuts. You gave him his bailout. You gave him his Patriot Act. You gave him the RAVE Act. You continue to further these policies and then act like you're going to save us. Folks, we're educated people. Is there anybody here who could count higher than 2? We need more choices. But I just want to remind you folks that what you are doing here today is about as American as you can possibly be. And I want to maintain and forward that spirit of the untamable American horse. The population that sees something it needs and stands up together and takes it.
Obama and McCain are both for the wars. Obama sometimes says he's against the Iraq War, but he voted for the funding of the war almost every single time. And he has all kinds of twisted logic for it. He says, well, if we got 16 senators to be with us, we could vote against the funding. But then why don't you just, first of all, why don't you just vote against it? And then second of all, that's not true, because with 40 senators you can do a filibuster and you can stop the war. So he's a lying bastard just like McCain. And, he's pushing the Afghanistan war like that's the right war. But, I mean, the UN just came out against the Afghanistan war. England is now saying that it's impossible. And France, and, everyone's coming out against it. And it's just a big sham, and it's all imperialism, and the major candidates are for it. So.